was one of the gods of science fiction. L. Ron Hubbard, the golden age, one of the gods of science fiction. And he wrote some of the most amazing, amazing prose ever to grace the pages of a book. And this is universally acclaimed. People will talk smack about the Church of Scientology, and yet at the same time, they have to admit that L. Ron Hubbard was one of the greatest writers of the 20th century. And every science fiction writer from then to now is influenced by him. Star Trek originates with L. Ron Hubbard. The Star Trek universe and the whole concept. I could go on, but I'm not. My point is, we're talking about a religion that has acolytes and followers willing to die for what they believe as a religious belief, who believe in proselytization, which is to convince you to believe in their religion and to follow the principles of their religion, absolutely. And I mean to the death, like as in you're expendable if you don't follow the principles of this religion. And at the very same time, they don't call what they believe a religion, and they don't call themselves religious, and they deny that they are a religious order. And just like all religious orders, they have hierarchies of organization, priesthood. They have their popes, but they're more ecumenical in the sense of they have multiple popes. There's not just one pope, okay? And just like in the Orthodox churches, but in kind of a bastardized way, because I think this is a bastardization of traditional religion, which was to express love and compassion. This religion has a completely different agenda. Its agenda is not to express love and compassion. Well, the allopaths are the medical arm of the technocrats, okay? And they have that list of their hierarchy, of their elders and their patriarchs and so on. And mostly they start with philosopher, and then this idea of philosopher-scientist, okay? Even though at the same time they'll try to tell you that there's no place for philosophy in science, because pure science is mostly a matter of math and algorithms and so on. But math and algorithms are data sets, and data sets are constructs, which are accumulations, and in some cases random accumulations of numbers, that then you apply an algorithm to, and the algorithm itself is a man-made construct based on a philosophy. In other words, you develop an algorithm by postulating a question and then coming up with a shorthand way of sorting through the data set to give you an output, which you then philosophically conjecture as to what that output means. And then you ask other people what they think that output means. And if a few of you and a few of your chosen buddies, and it's always the same group, it's not a bunch of different people who make these decisions, it's always a really small group of people who make these decisions, okay, agree on what you think the data sets mean, you then take that as truth, and then you postulate, which means you disseminate that information as if it is some representation of objective reality, and it's not. It can't be. The reason it can't be a representation, your conjecture as far as what the data set means cannot be an expression of objective reality, is because you did it. Is your opinion. And all of your opinions are subjective. In fact, that's the difference between subjective and objective. So technically speaking, if I get up out of this chair right now and I run outside and run around in the grass, okay, and I notice that I'm running around in the grass, That is actually an expression of an objective experience. Okay? But now if I try to convince you that actually I'm still here while I'm running around out in the grass, that is subjective. And some of you will buy it, and some of you won't. Some of you will go, well wait a minute. No, he left. I can see him through the window. He's out running around out in the grass. And others will say, no, but he said he's still here. And I think I still see him in the chair. And that's completely subjective. And then two others out of the group will argue, will fight with each other over who's right and who's wrong and who had the best angle or view on whether he could run out of the room and is out in the grass or somebody else, and you guys will then fight over it. And actually, scientifically speaking, the person with the biggest club will win the argument, whether I'm outside or sitting here. Not as an expression of reality, of objective reality, but the final opinion on what's real will be determined by committee of power and influence. And then we're going to call it science. Up until the 1800s, all doctors in the world, except for a very small minority, a very few individuals, believed that all illnesses were caused by entities and spiritual powers. You with me? Some cultures call them demons. Some cultures called them angels. Some cultures called them entities. Some cultures called them ancestor spirits. Ancestor spirits. In Thai, they were called Kwan, which is a kind of an entity, and there's different hierarchies of Kwan, like there's P Kwan, and there's different kinds of Kwan. Some are good and some are bad, okay? And the scientific consensus of the origins of disease was that disease organisms were intelligent, okay? Disease organisms were intelligent, and they had started developing microscopes so they could look at bugs and amoeba and smaller things, even into the realm of bacteria. Some of these microscopes by the turn of the century had magnifications of 28,000 diopters. As manual microscopes with glass optics made by companies in Germany like Leica. Okay, Leica started its life out building optics for telescopes and microscopes, because cameras hadn't been invented when Leica started this business, and then eventually they went into camera lenses. But today, the most expensive and the world's best optical microscopes are built by Leica, and you can pay 20 grand, you can pay $50,000 for a microscope, a new one, okay? Not digital, because digital is in some science of observation, digital, like video microscopes and digital microscopes, they don't use them. And the reason why they don't use them is because digital is an interpolation of an algorithm. In other words, I scan a field with a plate that measures photonic energy bouncing off the object using what's called an objector, okay? It collects that information on a plate, a silicon plate, and then it counts the photons and counts the densities and counts that, and then using a mathematical algorithm, it collects them, sorts them, and then outputs them into something that you would call the image. So actually the gap from where I'm sitting here through the camera to the lens or to the display, even on the digital recording, is really far away. And there's a lot of manipulation that goes on to get from what the camera is looking at to what you see on a monitor. And it's actually been recognized now. There's a problem with that. And the problem is, it's now a scientific fact that as you watch a video in real time, you change the character of the image that you're watching. That in fact, if you record an image with no observers and compare it to an image scientifically that has people watching the image as it's being filmed, there will be digital artifacts in the second one that are not in the first one. Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
Why? Because scientifically I can take the recording and I can actually count the exact number of pixels in it. I can do that. I can run it through an analysis, and I can actually count the actual, in every frame on the digital image. I can actually tell you, well, there's 17,364, and they have this density. And I can tell you exactly. And I can tell you the temperature of every pixel, every individual pixel. And this has been done, and compare an image that was filmed with nobody watching with a film of the exact same activity with somebody watching. They've even done this where they've had the somebody watching in different countries. Like they film in Massachusetts, but they watch in St. Petersburg, Russia, and vice versa. And they found this artifact. And now they call it the observer artifact. And nobody knows how that works. Well, I know how it works. Because objective reality is far more than what you see or feel or weigh or touch or taste. In other words, the five senses. And scientists try to tell us that the world is the sum of what we can discern with the five senses and or the tools that we use to extend the five senses. And no matter how big the tools are, Hadron Collider, no matter how sophisticated the tools are, Hadron Collider, there is actually a limit to our ability to observe reality. And there are concrete limits of us to weigh, measure, and quantify objective reality. Because objective reality is just bigger than our brain. It's just bigger than our brain. So now you have a group of people that use their biased interpretation of subjective reality based on weighs and measures. In other words, all weighs and measures in science are based on the five senses. What you can see, what you can smell, what you can taste, what you can feel, what you can... Do you get it? Okay? Whereas traditional medicine is not. It's the big problem. It's why there'll never be a reconciliation between indigenous, traditional.
You will grow to be tall, staring out over miles of land without it.